and welcome back to Voyage of a Time Wanderer. Today I am here to share my Victober TBR for 2023. So it is finally that most wonderful time of the bookish year, the month that we all celebrate the wonders of Victorian literature. Victober. I am super excited that it is finally Victober Eve when I am filming this, and I just can't wait to dive into all of the books that I have planned for this month. For me, Victober has become one of my favorite times of the year for reading, and I pretty much start planning my TBR as soon as Victober is over. I'm already planning my TBR for next year. So the books that have ended up on my TBR I have been mulling over for the last 11-12 months, and I am really happy and excited about the books that I have chosen. So this year there are 5 co-hosts for Victober: Katie from Books and Things, Kate Howe, Petra from Petra U, Roz from Skelly Dandling About with the Books, and Marissa from Blatantly Bookish. As always, I'm really grateful to all of the co-hosts for the effort that they put into making Victober such a fun time for the whole bookish community. So without further ado, I will get into the books that have made it onto my 2023 TBR. Each of the 5 hosts has a prompt to help us narrow down our selections, and I did choose a book for each of the prompts this year. So Katie's prompt this year was to read a book of New Woman fiction, and for this prompt I am choosing The Benefactress by Elizabeth von Arnim. So Elizabeth von Arnim has really become one of my favorite modern classics authors, and after reading The Enchanted April, I decided I wanted to go back and read through her entire bibliography in publication order. So this is the 3rd book that she published. Well, it's the 4th book that she published, but the 3rd novel. So I've also read Elizabeth and Her German Garden and The Solitary Summer, which are kind of quasi-autobiographical fiction. And then the 3rd book that she published I haven't read, and that's like a collection of nursery rhymes and songs that she published for one of her children. And so this is the 4th book that she published, and it was published in 1901, so it's right at the end of the Victorian era, and it's the last book of hers that would count as Victorian. She's really more of a 20th century author in my mind, but The Benefactress does count as Victorian literature, and I thought that it would be good for the New Woman prompt because all of Elizabeth von Arnim's books that I've read so far deal with early feminism in a really interesting way. And from the description of The Benefactress, it sounds like this book will be no exception. The blurb on Goodreads says, Anna Estcourt, 25 and beautiful, is the penniless ward of her distant brother and his exasperating wife. Turning down all offers of marriage, scornful at the thought of leaning on a man for help and comfort, she thinks only of the independence which seems an impossible dream. But out of the blue, Uncle Joachim, her mother's brother, leaves her a handsome property in Germany. Her longed-for independence is within her grasp, and though it's a rocky beginning with the locals, she loves her new home. Keen to use her newfound wealth for the benefit of others, she embarks on a plan to throw open her doors to distressed gentlewomen, a project which takes a far greater physical and emotional toll than she could have imagined. Although she maintains that she is not interested in men, might the friendship of her neighboring landowner, Axel Lohm, make her new life a little easier to bear? So it sounds like a really interesting story. Like many of von Arnim's work, it kind of mirrors her life between England and Germany, and I think it might be somewhat historical fiction. The picture on Goodreads has like more of 1700s dress on the front, but I know sometimes classics editions just pull random pictures and don't really think about whether the painting matches the fashion of the time period, but I think I saw on the Wikipedia page that it might be set a few decades or maybe even a century back from when it was published. I think it sounds like our main character Anna is going to be really interesting and complex as she deals with societal expectations towards women and marriage at the time, as well as what it would be like to navigate an unexpected increase in social stature and class. So I think it will discuss many of the issues that Katie highlighted that were features of New Women fiction. And I'm excited to read another von Arnim because I already know that I'm going to really enjoy the writing style of this book. Then Kate's prompt was to read a book that featured a stranger or an outsider, and I had originally planned on reading Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy for this prompt, but it looks like that is going to be the pick for Kate's Patreon for November-December, so I got to clear one book off my TBR and move it into November, and instead for this prompt I am going to be listening to the audiobook of Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm really excited to finally be reading Cranford. I watched the miniseries probably more than a decade ago for the first time, right after watching North and South and falling in love with it, and then when I heard that there was another miniseries based on Elizabeth Gaskell's writing, I devoured Cranford. And I remember really enjoying the miniseries, but I've never gone back to read the source material. This is supposed to be quite an episodic book. It's almost more of a collection of short stories, all set in the town of Cranford, which is based on Elizabeth Gaskell's childhood home. And I believe the stories are told from the perspective of an outsider in the village, someone who just visits the village occasionally and kind of collects these stories about what has been happening in village life. And I know there's also another major plot point when a strange man moves into the town. So there are a number of aspects of this book that deal with strangers and outsiders in village life. And I love Elizabeth Gaskell's writing, and I'm planning to kick off my Victober with this book because it's a fairly short audiobook. I think the audiobook is just 6 or 7 hours, and I have the Audible version that's narrated by Prunilla Scales, who plays Sybil in Fawlty Towers. So I'm looking forward to that audiobook, and because it's a fairly short one, I think I'll be able to listen to it within the first few days of Victober and kind of start my Victober off with a quick read by one of my favorite Victorian authors. Then Marissa's prompt was to read a book by a new-to-me Victorian author, and for this I'm going for some theological writing by John Henry Newman. So I have this selected sermons, prayers, and devotions that I picked up off of thrift books. This has 35, I think. Yeah, 35 different sermons by him, as well as the selected prayers at the end. So a little bit more than one a day. I'm not going to be stressing about getting this done during Victober because it looks like most of the sermons are around 10 pages, and I really want to take my time and enjoy them. And I'm also still finishing up my current devotional book, so once I finish that, I will be picking up the selected sermons by John Henry Newman and kind of slowly working my way through as many sermons as I can get to in Victober, and then carrying it on through into November. My goal is to have this one finished before Advent starts. John Henry Newman was an Anglican vicar and a scholar and professor at Oxford. He was very influential in the Oxford movement. And then when he was in his 40s, he converted to Catholicism and became a Catholic priest, and eventually rose up to the rank of cardinal and continued to write extensively on theological topics. He was canonized in 2019, so he's now a Catholic saint, and I'm really looking forward to finally diving into a dedicated collection of his work. I've read quotes here and there by him, as well as heard his famous hymn, Lead Kindly Light, but I've never read a whole book of his writing, so I'm looking forward to picking up this book for the new-to-me Victorian author prompt. Then Petra's prompt was to read a Victorian novel that was written from a first-person point of view, and for this prompt I'm using Dracula by Bram Stoker. I've been following along with the Dracula daily read-along since the beginning of May. Dracula is written in the form of letters, diary entries, newspaper articles, telegrams, all things that are dated, and so this email list sends out any snippets of the book that are dated for that date on the date that they would supposed to have been written in the book. So on September 30th we get the diary entries from a number of characters and the letters that were written and dated as September 30th. So the book runs from the beginning of May to the beginning of November, but things have gotten really dramatic in the last week or so, and I've heard that some of the longest installments take place in October, and so Dracula is going to be taking up some of my reading time this month, so I thought I would use it for a Victober prompt since it is Victorian literature. I really only knew like the very broadest brushstrokes of what the Dracula story was, just kind of those pieces about vampires that have made its way into popular culture. And so I've really been enjoying reading Dracula Daily since May. It's a super unique format to experience a book in, and it has made me feel like I'm part of the story. And then Roz's prompt was to read a book where social class featured significantly to the plot. And I'm going to be using the group read, which is The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, to fulfill this prompt. Like Gaskell and Mary Elizabeth Braddon, who we're going to be getting to in a minute, Trollope is one of the authors that is like a fixture now in my Victober reading. I can't imagine a Victober without a Trollope. I was going to read Framley Parsonage, which is the next book that I have to read in the Barchester Chronicles, but when I saw that Trollope had already been picked for the group read, I made a little switcheroo, and so The Way We Live Now is officially on my TBR. I'm a little bit intimidated because I found out that this book is massive. It's like more than 450,000 words or something like that. It's longer than the longest Dickens book, which means I think it's going to be the longest book besides the Bible that I've ever actually read. It's like a 35-ish hour audiobook, so kind of right around the same length as Anna Karenina, which took me like 2 months to read earlier this year. But I do really enjoy Trollope's writing, and I feel very safe in the hands of Trollope. He sometimes puts characters through quite a lot of drama, but there's always been a fairly satisfactory, happy ending for the characters that you get the most emotionally invested in. This book apparently deals quite a bit with power and money and class, which is why I thought it would be a great natural fit in with Roz's prompt. And I'm really trying to avoid spoilers, so I haven't been reading much about the plot summary, but the very introductory paragraph on the Wikipedia article says that it was inspired by the financial scandals of the early 1870s, which is a hyperlink that I might want to read as background information. Trollope had just returned to England from abroad and was appalled by the greed and dishonesty these scandals exposed. This novel was his rebuke. It dramatized how such greed and dishonesty pervaded the commercial, political, moral, and intellectual life of that era. And it's said that it's somewhat of a satirical novel. So I'm not sure if that means that it is actually going to be a little bit funny at times, or if it just means that he's going to be exaggerating all of the worst traits that came out of these scandals. It sounds like we're going to be following two families, the Melmotte family, which includes Augustus Melmotte, who's the father of the family, who is a French swindler and scoundrel, and the Melmotte's daughter, as well as the Carbery family, which includes the authoress, Lady Carbery, and her adored son, Felix. And like all of Trollope's books that I've read so far, it looks like there's going to be a romantic plot that will round out the social commentary. This is going to be my fifth Trollope now, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all of his other books that I've read, so I'm sure The Way We Live Now will be no exception, as long as I can find the time to fit in such a lengthy book around all the rest of my Victober reading. I think I'm going to leave this one more towards the end of Victober and then really focus on it for the last week or two of the month. So those are my selections for the prompts, but of course I have a couple more books that I just couldn't bear to cut from my TBR that I'm really hoping to get to this month as well. The first of those is Maud, the Illustrated Diary of a Victorian Woman, which is the diary of Maud Berkeley, who was a middle-class Victorian woman, and this contains excerpts of her diary from 1888 to 1899. And what makes this particularly unique and charming is that she has pretty much fully illustrated her diary entries. So to go with each page, there are just a ton of gorgeous illustrations, paintings, sketches to kind of illustrate what she was doing on these days, and I guess emphasize any particularly funny or standout moments. This is a traveling book with Kate Howe's Patreon, and it just so happened that my turn with the book lined up with Victober, and so I'm really excited that I'll have a book in this format to intersperse with the heavier, longer books. I think it'll be really fun to pick it up and read a couple pages of this diary every day during Victober, because this is just absolutely beautiful. And I think is going to make me think about the way that Victorian people lived in a new way, just reading about people's everyday lives and the things that they thought were important enough to chronicle in their diary. And then speaking of Kate Howe's Patreon, the book club pick in that group for this month is Man and Wife by Wilkie Collins. So that is another very chunky book that I am planning to read this October. This is another one of Wilkie Collins' sensation novels. And like many sensation novels of the time, and as the title indicates, it is preoccupied with questions about marital status and in particular about the Scottish marriage laws. I don't know very much more than that about this book. I am reading it because it is a book club pick and because I have heard really good things about it, but I'm very wary of having sensation novels spoiled for me, and in particular I've heard that this one has some very shocking twists, and so I haven't really read any reviews or plot summaries lest I accidentally find that out and don't get to experience the pure shock and horror for myself while reading the book. This is another one that I am planning to listen to on audiobook since it is a longer book and I like having some audiobooks to mix into my Victober TBR. And then finally, I have made Mary Elizabeth Braddon a standing item in my Victober TBRs. And so 2 Victobers ago, I read Lady Audley's Secret, and then last year I read Aurora Floyd, and this year I'm planning to read Willard's Weird, which is a very strange title. I don't really know what either of those words mean in the context of the title, but I'm sure I'll find out. Mary Elizabeth Braddon is another sensation novelist who I just absolutely adore. She has a wonderful way of building tension and suspense throughout her books, as well as including a lot of really beautiful descriptive writing about nature and architecture that is very Victorian in a way that I just love. Willard's Weird, from the description, sounds like it's leaning more towards the mystery novel side of the sensation novel spectrum, and it says, a village in Cornwall is thrown into turmoil after a young girl falls from a train to her death. Was this an accident or murder? The mystery deepens when clues link the girl to a double homicide committed 10 years earlier. Braddon's sensational novel takes us to the estates of aristocrats, the haunts of tabloid writers, the homes of bohemian artists, and the dark alleyways of Paris. It's one of the earlier Victorian mystery novels to be published, and I absolutely love mystery novels and Mary Elizabeth Braddon's writing, and it sounds like it'll be a really excellent, kind of scary, atmospheric mystery novel to close out my Victober with. So those are the books that I have on my Victober TBR this year. I'm a little bit intimidated because I made the mistake of adding up the word count / audiobook hours, and it is an extensive reading list, but I'm really excited about all of the books, and I do dedicate pretty much all of my reading time in Victober to Victorian literature, so I am hopeful that I'll be able to get through all of these titles, and if there's a couple that have to be finished off in November, that will be just fine with me. So I hope if you are participating in Victober, you have a wonderful month of reading ahead as well, and until next time, enjoy wandering through the pages of a good book. Bye.